Alright, before we even get started here, I just want to make something super clear. Everything you're about to hear in this video is my own opinion. We're going to be looking over the top 10 Pokemon that I believe to be the most underrated in Scarlet and Violet. Ones that are cool, potentially strong, and should just be used more often than I see them being used. You might have used them, your grandma may have used them, why even Shigeru Omori may have used them. But to me, they're still underrated, and that's my opinion, and it's staying like that. So with that out of the way, yes, we're looking at the top 10 most underrated Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. I like a lot of these, and some of them I never even really bothered to think about using until I really looked into what they could do playthrough-wise, or just how cool they actually are. So without further ado, let's hop into this list and have some fun. We're going to start off today's video with Reverum. Now, it's obviously not a Pokemon that anyone has forgotten about while playing the game. The concept of a roaming car engine is very funny, and with the steel poison typing, it's pretty cool as well. You have to battle 5 of them in the story whenever you take on Team Star's leaders. And it's just an all-around solid Pokemon. It has base 119 attack and 90 speed. And that typing leads itself to being incredibly defensive, with a big weakness to ground, and a smaller one to fire being the only true drawbacks. I feel like a lot of people didn't end up using it because of a desire to use Clodsire, Tinkaton, or both, thus leading to this engine being left in the dust. It's a shame, because it has Shift Gear, which is a pretty fantastic setup move, and can get Iron Head and Poison Jab prior to even evolving from Verum. I know people definitely believe Reverum is a solid Pokemon, but what makes it underrated, I think, is how little I see people using it compared to other Pokemon of its typings. Next, I'm going to highlight Paldean and Tauros as something of an underrated Pokemon. I think a lot of people didn't really care for this regional variant, and overall were pretty disappointed by what that gimmick afforded us this gen. So Tauros, from what I've seen, has been really panned here due to its design, and of course the fact that its shiny is absolutely awful. Though that's a bit of a running theme with some Pokemon this generation. So Tauros is very strong, pretty fast, and has some variety to it. There's 3 different versions, one being only a fighting type, while the 2 others are dual typed with fire and water. It gets interesting moves across the 3 that you're able to choose from. And honestly, I think if it looked a little more interesting and there weren't more interesting fighting types like Pawmot and Annihilate introduced, maybe Paldean and Tauros would get more of a look from people, because it indeed is strong. It's telling though, with only 2 regional variants in this generation, it doesn't feel good that one of them was just basically painted black and trotted out. They could have definitely done more with this design. Alright, so this next one. If you saw the Best Team New Pokemon Only Edition, you'll know I already touched upon how I got this one a little wrong. Klop is actually a pretty solid Pokemon, so it's basically here because I personally really underrated it. Though I know some people still aren't giving it the credit it deserves. This mooing crab is actually so much better than I thought it would be, with 115 defense and 100 attack. But even more surprisingly, a decent 75 base speed. Its signature ability Anger Shell is also really good, boosting its attack and speed when its health goes beneath 50%. That's like instant sweet material with this thing. Considering how easy it is to get your hands on the Klop, and the strong moves it gets, like Stone Edge, Brick Break, and even Trailblaze for some speed increases, it's hard to look past how good Klop can be. But unless you enjoy goofy crabs, I think Nacli was the kind of Pokemon in that immediate area that would get people's attention. I'm sorry again, Klop. You're a pretty cool dude. So next, we're gonna go with the absolute wall that is Flourgus. I know that it isn't a big deal to a lot of people, especially in a generation where Tinkaton, Azumarill, and Gardevoir are available, but it's actually a fantastic Pokemon specially. We're talking 112 special attack and 154 special defense. That's a crazy set of stats, and quite frankly, only having weaknesses to steel and poison is of course a massive W that fairy types continue to hold. Its move pool is also a big part of why it's underrated. Moonblast is naturally super strong, but with access to Petal Blizzard and Pollen Puff, it's got some decent sorts of coverage on it. I think it's just always been thrown to the side because people naturally often don't care about using defensive Pokemon in a playthrough, and there's always another fairy type or two that end up outshining it. Well, I'm gonna give this flower its flowers today. Shoutouts to you, Flourgus. So this next one is another case of me completely underrating something as opposed to something most of the fanbase did. Lowkicks was a very pleasant surprise, being our first bug dark Pokemon. It turns out, these are actually a nice duo of typings to combine, because adding in the dark typing only brings one new weakness to fairy types, and that's it. It's a decent attacker with solid speed, but what I didn't pay enough attention to was its move pool. Access to Lunge and Sucker Punch for stab is really good, but then it gets some nice fighting type moves in its pull as well, and Leech Life to heal your Bugman. It's really just up there in the discussion of best bug type attackers among what you could look at as early evolution bug types. I know Spidops is more of the early route bug Pokemon here, but Lowkicks isn't too far off. I'll be using Lowkicks when I play Scarlet for sure. So yeah, this one, much like Klop, was more of a personal entry on this list. But don't worry, the top 5 is filled with ones I think everyone slept on one way or another. We'll open up the second half of the list with this Pathra, which is another nice speedy special attacker that is actually one of very few purely psychic type Pokemon in Paldea. There's a few others that are pretty bad aside from Gothitelle, but kind of like I mentioned with Flourgus, it's a bit overshadowed by other Pokemon that have its typing. I know many people didn't end up using as Pathra because they chose Gallade, Gardevoir, or Farigiraf among many others. It's also a bit unfortunate that Speed Boost is only available with an ability patch, which isn't available until you start taking on the more challenging raid battles. Those things will make people turn their head away from this ostrich, but they really shouldn't. Its signature move Lumina Crash is so awesome. And with access to Dazzling Gleam to defend against dark types, and side moves like Flash Cannon and Energy Ball for coverage, you're going to be able to get a lot more out of this Desert Dweller than you'd think. I'd say that perhaps this is one of the Pokemon a lot of you could fight me on, but honestly, if so many of you end up saying it's not underrated, I'll be very happy, because it shouldn't be at all. I'd rather be wrong if it meant Pathra got the respect it deserves. Alright, so this is the last new Pokemon I have on the list, and it's Earthworm. I think from both a competitive and in-game perspective, it's underrated. Obviously, I want to stay focused on in-game stuff for this video, but if you remember in my overrated video when I talked about Cyclezar, I mentioned how it potentially made more sense to use Shed-Tail with Earthworm, even if it didn't have access to Regenerator. It's just a nicer deal to me to keep that substitute up before the new Pokemon even comes in. That's beside the point though. From the in-game angle, it's good to use over a lot of steel types thanks to its ability Earth Eater, which eliminates its ground type weakness entirely and restores HP. That's such an OP ability for any Pokemon, let alone for a steel type. And with the defense it has, it's got a great opportunity to wall fighting type moves. Access to Iron Head at level 21, and then Earthquake at level 47 basically makes Earthworm a superb steel type that should be included on many teams, even if the idea of Tinkaton is really drilled into someone's psyche. So these last 3 Pokemon are all ones from previous generations, as this time around they're quite a bit underrated. Like here in the 3rd spot, we've got Gogoat. It's not appeared in a hot minute in a game to use in a playthrough, and as it turns out, it's actually pretty dang good. It's got a couple of solid attack stats and a relatively high HP stat, but its greatness lies within the move pool. Gogoat has access to its typical grass stab type moves, including Hornleech and Leaf Blade. But how about the coverage options? There's everything from Earthquake, which can be remembered, to Brick Break, Zen Headbutt, Play Rough, even Wild Charge and Surf. There's everything under the sun that Gogoat can accomplish, and all it takes is switching it in on a single grass type move to make it seriously over the top strong. I can't believe how easy it is to put together a great Go-Goat in these games. And I'm not too sure I or anyone else gives this thing the respect it actually deserves. Just get over its speed issue. In a playthrough, it's really not worth worrying about. So in this penultimate spot, we've got a Pokemon that I certainly don't underrate, but I feel you guys sure do. Oricorio is really good, guys. It's not only fitting in Paldea with its Bile style, but it's a speedy special attacker that offers the flying type alongside a few nice secondaries that fit onto plenty of teams. While you're better off using Kilowattrel for a flying electric type instead, the other three are comparable to other options. If you want a special attacker, Oricorio would end up being a better option than Talonflame, for example. It can set up with Calm Mind, and then really all you need to do is run Revelation Dance and Hurricane, and you've got yourself a really great Pokemon. Like, dude, it can even get Quiver Dance via Egg Move if you get to that point. Oricorio is a nice strong option for your team in Paldea that you probably often sleep on, and that's alright. I can't blame you. However, there is but one more Pokemon that is even more of an underrated choice. Pasimian takes our number 1 spot today. And before you tell me about how you and your grandmother used it to great success, I counter with this. There are few Pokemon duos I find more forgettable than Pasimian and Oranguru. Like, really, I've forgotten them in the past, and I looked around at some stats regarding how much they're searched for, and it's basically 0. It's actually a bit of a shame, because as it turns out, Pasimian is actually incredibly good. It has 80 base speed and 120 base attack, with some nice physical bulk as well. Being a pure fighting type, it only has 3 weaknesses, and thus doesn't have as many things to worry about as other Pokemon. Its move pool has Close Combat, Earthquake, Rock Slide, Iron Head, and Knock Off via Egg Move. And guess what? Those last 3 moves are all incredibly good at offering coverage for its weaknesses. You'll just have such an easy time slotting this thing in on your team and letting it lead point. No pun intended. I think you could argue any of the top 3 belong in the top spot today. But as for Pasimian, it's just too ignored, and I couldn't let that go by anymore. Alright, that's it. Those are my top 10 most underrated Pokemon in our new games. And for those of you who made it through the whole thing without leaving too many comments about how I was wrong to have these opinions, I salute you. If you guys have any Pokemon personally underrated to you, I want to hear about them. And if there are any more top 10s you'd like to see me go over and get my opinion on, share those too. But with that said, until next time everyone, thanks for watching the video and for coming through and enjoying Scarlet and Violet with me. We've got so much content coming surrounding Gen 9 through the end of the year and beyond, including the top 10 strongest Pokemon, the best team for the games, and much more. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and Mystic Umbreon Shorts YouTube channel. When we get to 5,000 subs on the channel, we're going to have a new series related to Scarlet and Violet that will be exclusive to there, so go subscribe. Also, if you're into fanfictions or Genshin Impact, check out Mystic Reads and Tebotchnary. I offer a ton of creative spoken word content over there, and I do a bunch of theories and lore videos surrounding Genshin Impact. So come join me over there at that floats your boat. That's all for now. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time for more Scarlet and Violet content.